The broken implant. The mining colony of Vesper 9 was a grim place, built on a barren rock orbiting a distant sun. It was a world of endless machinery, loud drills, and tired workers trying to carve out a living. Kara, a skilled mechanic with grease-stained hands and a sharp mind, was one of those workers. She wasn't just good at fixing machines, she was the best. If something was broken, Kara could fix it. But one day, something found her that wasn't just broken. It was far beyond anything she had ever seen. It was a quiet evening when Kara first met Oren. She was working late in her small, cluttered workshop at the edge of the colony. The air smelled of oil and metal, and the only sounds were the hum of her tools. Kara liked the quiet. It helped her think. But the silence was broken by a faint rustling sound near the workshop's entrance. At first, she thought it was just a stray mining droid, but when she turned around, her heart nearly stopped. A small figure stood in the doorway, a child, or at least something that looked like one. His skin shimmered faintly under the dim workshop lights, and his eyes glowed a soft blue. His clothes were tattered, and he looked fragile, like he hadn't eaten in days. "Who are you?" Kara asked, trying to keep her voice calm. The boy didn't respond. Instead, he stumbled forward, clutching his head as if in pain. That's when Kara noticed the strange metallic device embedded in the side of his head. It looked like some kind of implant, but it was sparking and flickering as if it were malfunctioning. Kara hesitated. This wasn't just a child. This was something alien. The implant wasn't human technology, and she could tell just by looking at it. The design was too intricate, too advanced. But the boy's eyes, wide with fear and desperation, made her decision for her. Whatever he was, he needed help. "All right, come in," she said, guiding him to a chair. "Let's see what's going on with you." As the boy sat down, Kara grabbed her tools and a diagnostic scanner. She wasn't a doctor, but she knew machines better than most people knew themselves. She scanned the implant, and the results made her stomach twist. The device wasn't just broken, it was unstable. It was sending out strange signals, frequencies Kara didn't recognize. "What is this thing?" she muttered to herself, running her hand through her short hair. The boy finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It hurts." Kara's heart clenched. "I'll fix it," she promised. "Just stay still." As she worked, she realized the implant was far more complex than anything she'd ever seen. It was fused with the boy's brain, connected to his neural pathways in ways she couldn't fully understand. If she made one wrong move, she could hurt him, or worse. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to keep him calm. "Oren," he said, his voice trembling. "All right, Oren. I'm Kara. We're going to figure this out together, okay?" Oren nodded, but his face was pale, and his breaths were shallow. Kara worked as quickly and carefully as she could, stabilizing the implant enough to stop the sparks. But as she did, she noticed something strange. The implant wasn't just a piece of technology. It was sending out a signal, a faint, pulsing beacon that seemed to be calling to something or someone. Kara felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you?" she whispered, more to herself than to Oren. Before Oren could answer, a loud noise outside the workshop made them both jump. Kara peeked out the window and saw a group of colony security officers heading their way. They were armed and moving fast. "They found me," Oren said, his voice filled with fear. "Why are they after you?" Kara asked. I ran away. They want the implant." Kara didn't need to hear more. If the colony authorities wanted the implant, it wasn't for a good reason. She could see it in Oren's terrified eyes. He wasn't just a runaway. He was in serious danger. "All right, kid," Kara said, grabbing her toolkit and a small backpack. "We're leaving. Now." Oren looked at her, confused. "Why are you helping me?" Kara paused. She didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was because she saw something in his eyes that reminded her of herself, lost, alone, and scared. Or maybe it was because she couldn't stand by it and let someone get hurt, no matter who or what they were. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Now move." As they slipped out the back of the workshop, Kara couldn't shake the feeling that she was getting herself into something far bigger than she'd ever imagined. The broken implant, the alien technology, the signal, it all pointed to something dangerous. But she didn't have time to think about that now. All she knew was that she had to protect Orin, no matter what. And as the night swallowed them, Kara couldn't help but wonder, what had she just gotten herself into? The pursuit. The barren landscape of Vesper 9 stretched endlessly under a blood-red sky. Kara's boots crunched against the rocky ground as she led Orin through the narrow canyons that twisted away from the colony. The boy stumbled behind her, his breathing labored, his small hand clutching hers tightly. Every so often, he winced, clutching his head where the implant sparked faintly like a dying ember. Kara glanced back, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. She knew they didn't have much time. The colony's security forces would already be searching for them. Orin wasn't just a runaway. He was a prize, something valuable enough to hunt down with no questions asked. "Can you keep up?" Kara asked, keeping her voice low. Orin nodded, though his legs wobbled. "I think so." Kara tightened her grip on his hand. "Good. We need to put as much distance between us and them as possible." Suddenly, a distant hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Kara froze, pulling Orin close to the rocky wall of the canyon. She squinted at the sky, and her heart sank. A sleek, black drone zipped through the air, scanning the terrain with an eerie blue light. "Stay quiet," Kara whispered, crouching low. The drone hovered, its sensors sweeping the area like a predator searching for prey. Kara held her breath, her mind racing. Her workshop had been filled with tech. She could have rigged up an EMP or scrambled the drone signal. But out here, she had nothing but her wits and a broken alien implant. Orin whimpered softly, clutching his head as the implant flickered again. The faint signal it emitted seemed to pulse in sync with the drone's movements, as if calling it closer. "No, no, no," Kara muttered under her breath. She grabbed a handful of loose rocks and hurled them toward a distant boulder. The clatter echoed through the canyon, drawing the drone's attention. It zipped off toward the sound, its blue light disappearing around a bend. Kara let out a shaky breath. "That won't work twice," she said. "We need to keep moving." They pressed on, navigating the labyrinth of canyons. Kara's mind raced with questions. Why was the implant sending a signal? And to whom? Every instinct screamed at her to get as far away from this mess as possible, but every time she looked at Orin's terrified face, she knew she couldn't abandon him. After what felt like hours, they reached an abandoned mining outpost nestled against the canyon walls. The metal structures were rusted and crumbling, remnants of a time when the colony had been thriving. Kara guided Orin inside the largest building, shutting the heavy door behind them. "Rest here," she said, handing him a water flask from her pack. "I need to think." Orin took the flask with shaky hands. "Why are they after me?" he asked, his voice trembling. Kara knelt in front of him, her expression serious. "That implant in your head, it's not human tech. It's something far more advanced. People like the ones chasing us, they'd kill to get their hands on it. And they don't care what happens to you." Orin looked down, his small frame trembling. "I didn't ask for this," he whispered. "I don't even remember how I got it." Kara frowned. That raised more questions than it answered. "You don't remember?" He shook his head. "I woke up one day, and it was there. I think it's calling to someone. I can feel it." Before Kara could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the outpost. Her blood turned cold. She peeked through a crack in the door and saw 3 armed security officers scanning the area. They were heavily armored, their visors glowing red as they communicated with each other. "They're here," Kara hissed. She turned to Orin, her mind racing. "Stay hidden. No matter what happens, do not come out." Oren's eyes widened in fear, but he nodded. Kara grabbed a rusted pipe lying nearby and positioned herself near the door. Her heart pounded as the footsteps grew louder. The officers were getting closer, their weapons gleaming under the dim light. The door creaked open, and the first officer stepped inside. Before he could react, Kara swung the pipe, hitting him squarely in the chest. He stumbled backward, but the others were already raising their weapons. Kara darted behind a metal crate as bullets ricocheted off the walls. She needed a plan, and fast. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on an old control panel covered in dust. If it still worked, she might be able to power up the outpost's ancient defense systems. "Buy me some time," she muttered under her breath, as if Oren could hear her. Kara sprinted toward the control panel, dodging gunfire. Her fingers flew across the cracked screen, bypassing dead circuits and rerouting power. Sparks flew as the outpost's dormant systems roared to life. Red lights blinked on, and a loud warning siren echoed through the canyon. The officers hesitated, looking around in confusion. Then, automated turrets emerged from the walls, targeting the intruders. Kara didn't wait to see the outcome. She grabbed Oren and bolted out the back door as chaos erupted behind them. As they ran into the night, Kara knew this was only the beginning. The implant signal wasn't just drawing humans, it was reaching something far bigger. And whatever it was coming for them. A risky ally. The dense fog of Vesper 9's canyon trails swallowed Kara and Oren as they fled deeper into the wilderness. Each step felt heavier than the last, the tension of their escape pressing on them like a physical weight. Oren clung to her side, his face pale and drawn, the flickering implant on his head casting faint, erratic glows against the rocky walls. Kara knew they couldn't keep running. They needed help, someone who could understand the implant and figure out how to fix it. But help wasn't easy to come by on Vesper 9, especially not the kind she needed. One name came to mind, Dr. Elias Lin. He was a disgraced scientist who had been exiled from the colony for his unethical experiments. Rumors painted him as dangerous, unstable, and brilliant. If anyone could figure out the alien tech embedded in Oren's skull, it was him. But going to Lin was a gamble, one that could cost them everything. "Who are we going to see?" Oren asked, his voice weak. "Someone who knows more about this kind of thing than I do," Kara replied, not slowing her pace. "He's not exactly friendly, so stay close." They trekked through the canyons for hours before they reached Lin's hideout. The entrance was concealed behind a curtain of vines and jagged rock formations. Kara approached cautiously, her hand resting on the old stun pistol she carried. "Dr. Lin," she called out, her voice echoing in the still air. "It's Kara Drell. I need your help." For a long moment, there was no response. Then, a mechanical whirring noise broke the silence. A small drone hovered into view, its single red eye scanning Kara and Oren. The drone's lens zoomed in on the implant, then on Kara's face. A crackling voice came through the drone speaker. "Kara Drell, it's been a while. I assume you've brought me something interesting, or you wouldn't risk showing up here." "It's not for you to keep," Kara shot back. "I just need answers." The drone hovered for another moment before retreating. A hidden door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor. Kara hesitated, then pulled Oren along as she stepped inside. The interior of Lin's hideout was a chaotic blend of technology and madness. Alien artifacts, half-disassembled machines, and glowing data screens cluttered every surface. Lin himself stood at the center of the chaos, a wiry man with sharp features and wild eyes. He wore a tattered lab coat, and his hands were stained with a mixture of grease and blood. Well, Lin said, his gaze locking onto Oren. "What do we have here?" "He's just a kid," Kara said sharply. "And he needs help." Lin ignored her, stepping closer to Oren. "That implant," he murmured, his fingers twitching as if itching to touch it. "It's beautiful. Where did you find this boy?" "I didn't find him," Kara replied. "He found me. And I don't care about your fascination. I need you to stabilize the implant before it kills him." Lin smirked, his eyes gleaming. "Always so direct, Kara." "Fine, bring him over." Oren hesitated, looking up at Kara. She nodded reassuringly, and he reluctantly stepped forward. Lin guided him to a chair surrounded by various diagnostic devices. As Lin worked, he muttered to himself, his voice a mix of awe and curiosity. "This tech, it's not human. Not even close. The neural interfaces are decades, maybe centuries, ahead of anything we've seen." "We already know it's alien," Kara said, her arms crossed. "Can you fix it or not?" Lin glanced at her, his expression serious for the first time. "Fixing isn't the problem. The implant isn't broken, it's reacting. It's sending out a signal." Kara's heart sank. "What kind of signal?" "The kind that gets noticed," Lin replied. "By anyone or anything listening. It's a beacon, Kara. A very loud one." Oren winced as the implant flickered again, its glow intensifying. Lin adjusted the machines, frowning. If this continues, the energy output could fry his brain, or worse. "Then turn it off," Kara snapped. Lin shook his head. "It's not that simple. The implant is tied directly to his neural pathways. Removing it could kill him. Disabling the signal might destabilize his brain entirely." Kara clenched her fists. "There has to be another way." "There is," Lin said, his voice low. "But you're not going to like it." He stepped away from Oren and gestured to a large, circular device in the corner of the room. It pulsed faintly, its alien design unmistakable. "This is a signal scrambler I've been working on. It can mask the implant's signal temporarily, but using it is risky. If the implant reacts poorly, it could accelerate its deterioration." "Do it," Kara said without hesitation. Lin raised an eyebrow. "You're sure? The kid might not survive." Kara glanced at Oren, who was watching her with a mixture of fear and trust. "He's got no chance if we don't." "So, yes, I'm sure." Lin shrugged. "Your call." He began powering up the scrambler, the room filling with a low hum. Kara stood by Oren, gripping his shoulder tightly. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise." The scrambler activated, sending waves of energy through the room. Oren cried out in pain as the implant's glow flared brightly, then dimmed. Kara watched in horror as his body convulsed. "Hold on, kid," she muttered. "Hold on." When the process finally ended, Oren slumped in the chair, unconscious but alive. The implant was quiet, its signal temporarily masked. Kara turned to Lin. "How long does this buy us?" "Not long," Lin said grimly. "Maybe a few days. But if the signal restarts, it'll be stronger. And whatever's listening will be even closer." Kara's stomach churned. They had stopped the immediate threat, but the danger was far from over. The clock was ticking, and they were running out of time. The hidden signal. The night on Vesper 9 was eerily quiet, broken only by the faint hum of machinery buried deep within the colony's abandoned systems. Kara sat on a rusted crate inside Dr. Lin's hideout, her eyes fixed on Oren. The boy was asleep on a makeshift cot, his small chest rising and falling in uneven rhythms. His implant, now dimmed, cast faint shadows on the wall. "Masking the signal isn't enough," Kara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was heavy with frustration. "We need to understand what it's calling, and why." Dr. Lin, hunched over his cluttered desk, didn't look up. "I told you, Kara, this is technology far beyond our understanding. I can stall it, slow it down, but I can't stop it." Kara's fists clenched. "You're supposed to be a genius. Figure it out." Lin finally turned to face her, his eyes tired but sharp. "Do you think I haven't tried? That implant is more than just a piece of tech. It's a conduit, a bridge between Oren's mind and something else. The signal it's sending isn't random. It's searching for something. And from what I've deciphered, whatever it's reaching for, it's coming." Kara felt a chill creep down her spine. How much time do we have? Lynn hesitated. Days. Maybe less. The weight of his words hung in the air. Kara stood and began pacing, her boots echoing against the cold floor. She had spent her life fixing things, machines, engines, systems, but this was something she couldn't simply repair. Oren's life was slipping through her fingers, and she couldn't stop it. As if sensing her despair, Oren stirred in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Kara rushed to his side, kneeling beside the cot. His eyelids fluttered, and then his eyes snapped open, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Kara," he whispered, his voice strained. I see them." "See who?" Kara asked, her voice urgent. "What are you talking about?" Oren sat up slowly, his small hands gripping the edges of the cot. "They're out there, waiting, watching." Kara exchanged a wary glance with Lynn. "Is this the implant talking?" she asked. Lynn stepped closer, scanning Oren with a handheld device. His frown deepened. "The signal's activity is spiking. It's not fully masked anymore. It's responding to something." "What does that mean?" Kara demanded. "It means," Lynn said grimly, "that Oren's not just a target. He's a guide. The implant is leading them here." Before Kara could respond, a loud noise outside the hideout made them all freeze. A low, droning hum vibrated through the walls, followed by a series of sharp clicks. Kara's heart pounded. She grabbed her stun pistol and motioned for Lynn to stay back. "It's too soon," Lynn muttered, his face pale. "They shouldn't be here yet." Kara peered through a small crack in the metal door. In the faint moonlight, she saw figures moving in the shadows. They weren't human. Tall, sleek, and clad in smooth, reflective armor, the aliens moved with an unnerving grace. Their heads were elongated, and their eyes glowed with a soft, otherworldly light. "They're here," Kara whispered, her grip tightening on her weapon. Oren clutched her arm. "Don't hurt them," he pleaded. "They're not all bad." Kara looked at him, her jaw tightening. "Oren, they're hunting you. We can't take that chance." Lynn's voice trembled as he spoke. "We need to get out of here. If they find us." "They'll find us anyway," Kara interrupted. "That implant is like a beacon. Running won't help." Oren suddenly straightened, his eyes glowing brighter. "They're speaking," he said. "In my head. They're searching for me." Kara crouched down to his level, gripping his shoulders. "What are they saying?" Oren's voice was distant, as if he were translating something far away. "They're calling me a key. They need the implant to open something. A gateway." Lynn's face went pale. "A gateway to what?" Before Oren could answer, a loud metallic clang reverberated through the hideout. The aliens were trying to breach the door. Kara stood, her mind racing. She turned to Lynn. "Is there any way to boost the scrambler? If we amplify it, maybe we can disrupt their connection to the signal." Lynn nodded reluctantly. "It's risky. Overloading it could destabilize the implant. And Oren." Kara glanced at the door, then back at Oren. "If we don't try, we're dead anyway." Lynn didn't argue. He rushed to the scrambler, tweaking its controls and connecting it to additional power sources. The machine began to hum louder, its energy output climbing. The door buckled under the aliens' assault, sparks flying as their tools cut through the metal. Kara stood in front of Oren, her stun pistol raised. "Stay behind me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. The scrambler's hum turned into a piercing whine as it reached maximum capacity. Oren cried out, clutching his head as the implant's glow flared brighter than ever. Lynn shouted something about unstable energy, but Kara couldn't hear him over the noise. Then, with a deafening crack, the scrambler unleashed a shockwave of energy that rippled through the hideout. The aliens outside staggered, their movements jerky and disoriented. The signal was disrupted, their connection severed. For a moment, there was silence. Kara turned to Oren, who had collapsed into her arms. His implant was dim, and his breathing was shallow but steady. Lin approached, his expression grim. "You bought us some time," he said. "But they'll adapt. They always do." Kara nodded, holding Orin close. She didn't say it out loud, but she knew the truth. Time wasn't on their side. The signal was still out there, and whatever the aliens were trying to open, it was only a matter of time before they succeeded. The sacrifice. The air was thick with tension as Kara's small transport ship hurtled through the canyons, its engines whining under the strain. Orin sat in the co-pilot's seat, his face pale, the faint glow of the implant barely visible beneath his hair. Dr. Lin paced nervously in the cramped cabin, mumbling calculations under his breath. "They'll track us again soon," Lin said, glancing at the flickering monitor displaying scrambled signals. "We disrupted their link, but the implant is like a lighthouse. It's only a matter of time before they zero in on us." Kara gritted her teeth, gripping the controls tightly. "Then we have to end this before they catch up." She guided the ship toward an old mining outpost nestled in a jagged ravine. It was a forgotten relic of Vesper 9's early days, its rusted structures hidden among the cliffs. Kara had chosen it for one reason: the power core. If she could overload the core, it might be enough to destroy the aliens' signal tracking and buy them a real chance to escape. "This is insane," Lin muttered as they landed. "You're talking about creating an explosion that could vaporize everything within miles, including us." Kara unstrapped herself and stood, grabbing her toolkit. "Do you have a better idea?" Lin opened his mouth to argue but closed it again. He didn't. The outpost was eerily silent as they stepped inside, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. Dust and debris littered the floors, and the air smelled of rust and decay. Kara led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Stay close," she said, glancing back at Orin. He nodded, his small frame dwarfed by the towering walls. They reached the heart of the outpost, where the power core hummed faintly, its once mighty energy reserves reduced to a flicker. Kara set to work immediately, her hands moving with practiced precision as she bypassed the safety protocols and prepared the core for overload. "Can you really do this?" Lin asked, hovering nervously. Kara didn't look up. "I don't have a choice. If we don't destroy their ability to track the signal, they'll keep coming. Orin won't survive another encounter." As if on cue, Orin gasped, clutching his head. The implant flared brightly, its glow pulsing in time with his shallow breaths. "They're here," he whispered. "I can feel them." Kara's stomach dropped. "How close?" Orin pointed toward the entrance, his hand trembling. "Close enough." Lin cursed under his breath. "We don't have time for this. Kara, hurry." "I'm going as fast as I can," she snapped, her fingers flying across the control panel. Sweat beaded on her forehead as the core's energy levels climbed steadily. A sharp metallic clang echoed through the outpost, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. The aliens were here. Their sleek forms moved through the shadows, their glowing eyes scanning the corridors. Kara turned to Lin. "Take Orin and get to the ship. I'll finish this." Lin shook his head. "You won't make it out in time." "Just go," Kara barked. "Get him out of here." Lin hesitated, then grabbed Orin's hand. The boy resisted, his glowing eyes locked on Kara. "You're coming too, right?" he asked, his voice trembling. Kara forced a smile. "I'll be right behind you. Now go." Lin pulled Orin away, the boy's protests fading as they disappeared down the corridor. Kara turned back to the power core, her focus razor sharp. The energy levels were almost at critical, but the aliens were closing in. She could hear their movements, the faint hum of their advanced weapons. "Come on," she muttered, her hands trembling as she made the final adjustments. The first alien appeared in the doorway, its towering form silhouetted against the dim light. It moved with an eerie grace, its elongated head tilting as it studied her. Kara raised her stun pistol, firing off a shot. The bolt struck the alien, but it barely flinched, its reflective armor absorbing the impact. "Figures," Kara muttered. She grabbed a wrench from her toolkit and threw it at the core's manual override lever. The lever snapped into place, and the core's hum turned into a deafening roar. The alien advanced, its glowing eyes fixed on her. Kara braced herself, ready to fight, when a sudden surge of energy erupted from the core. The alien paused, its head snapping toward the power source. Kara took her chance, sprinting toward the exit. The ground trembled beneath her feet as the core's energy reached critical mass. She could see the ship in the distance, its engines firing up, but the aliens were everywhere, their forms moving like shadows in the smoke. "Get the ship ready," Kara shouted into her comm. "I'm almost there." Lynn's voice crackled through the static. "You won't make it in time. The core." "Just do it," Kara snapped, pushing herself harder. Orin stood at the ramp, his glowing eyes wide with fear. "Kara," he shouted, reaching out to her. She was almost there when another alien stepped into her path, its weapon raised. Kara skidded to a stop, her heart pounding. There was no way around it. The core's energy spiked, a blinding light filling the outpost. Kara turned back to the ship and locked eyes with Orin. "Take care of yourself, kid," she whispered. Before the alien could fire, the core detonated, a massive explosion ripping through the outpost and sending shockwaves across the canyon. The ship's engines roared as Lynn pulled it into the air, the blast narrowly missing them. Inside the ship, Orin collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Lynn placed a hand on his shoulder, his expression grim. "She bought us the time we needed," Lynn said softly. "Now we have to make it count." As the ship disappeared into the night, Orin's implant flickered faintly, a small but persistent reminder that the fight was far from over. The alien revelation. The silence in the ship's cabin was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the engines. Orin sat by the window, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His small hands gripped the armrest tightly, his glowing eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and loss. Kara's sacrifice weighed heavily on him, but the implant in his head offered no time for grief. It pulsed faintly, a quiet reminder that their journey was far from over. Lynn, seated at the navigation console, worked furiously to interpret the garbled signals still emanating from the implant. His fingers flew across the controls, but his face remained tense. "It's quiet," Orin said softly, breaking the stillness. Lynn glanced back at him. "Too quiet. That explosion should have masked the signal completely, but it's still active, just fainter. They're still tracking us." Orin's gaze didn't leave the stars. "They're not hunting anymore." Lynn froze. "What do you mean?" "They're coming to meet me," Orin said, his voice distant. "They've answered the signal." Before Lynn could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared. The cockpit lights dimmed as an enormous shadow loomed ahead. Lynn scrambled to the controls, staring wide-eyed at the massive alien vessel that had appeared out of nowhere. The ship was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its surface shimmered with shifting patterns of light, and its sleek, organic design seemed to pulse like a living organism. Lynn's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a search party. It was something far more significant. The ship's communications panel crackled to life, and an otherworldly voice echoed through the cabin. The language was incomprehensible, but Orin reacted immediately. He clutched his head, the implant glowing brighter than ever. "They're speaking to me," Orin whispered. "They want me to come aboard." Lynn shook his head violently. "No. Absolutely not. We don't know what they'll do to you." Orin turned to him, his glowing eyes filled with a strange calm. "They don't want to hurt me. They need me." The alien ship extended a beam of light that enveloped Lynn's small vessel, pulling it gently toward a docking bay. Lynn tried to fight the controls, but the ship was unresponsive. "This isn't a choice anymore," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. The docking bay was massive, its walls lined with intricate glowing symbols. As the small ship settled onto the platform, the bay door opened, and 3 towering figures stepped forward. The aliens were majestic, their smooth, reflective armor flowing like liquid, and their elongated heads crowned with bioluminescent markings, their eyes, glowing faintly, locked onto Orin. Lynn stepped protectively in front of the boy. "What do you want with him?" he demanded, his voice trembling but defiant. One of the aliens raised a hand, and Lynn's translator device crackled. A voice, calm and resonant, emerged. "The child carries the key. He is the bridge between our worlds." Orin stepped forward before Lynn could stop him. "Why me?" he asked, his voice steadied despite the fear in his eyes. The alien tilted its head, the glow of its markings intensifying. "The implant was meant for a chosen envoy, but circumstances brought it to you. It is both burden and gift. Through you, our people and yours may find peace, or face ruin." Lynn narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean, ruin?" The alien gestured, and a holographic projection filled the bay. It showed a massive structure, a gateway floating in the void of space. The gateway pulsed with energy, its center swirling like a vortex. The alien's voice turned grave. "The signal activates the gate. Beyond it lies a force that can heal or destroy. The key must be turned by one who understands both sacrifice and hope. That one is the child." Orin's voice wavered. "I don't know how to do that." "You will," the alien said, "but you must come with us. The decision will shape the future of both our worlds." Lynn grabbed Orin's shoulder. "No, he's just a kid. He didn't choose this." The alien turned to Lynn, its gaze piercing. "The choice is not yours. It is his." Orin looked up at Lynn, then back at the aliens. He took a deep breath, the glow of the implant steadying, as if responding to his resolve. "I'll go," he said. "If it means stopping this, I'll do it." Lynn's stomach churned. "Orin, you don't have to." "It's what Kara would have done," Orin interrupted, his voice firm. "She believed in me. I can't let her sacrifice be for nothing." The alien stepped aside, gesturing for Orin to follow. He turned back to Lynn, his glowing eyes filled with a strange, quiet strength. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." Before Lynn could respond, Orin stepped onto the platform, the alien figures flanking him. As they disappeared into the depths of the ship, Lynn stood frozen, the weight of Kara's absence and Orin's courage pressing down on him. The ship's engines rumbled, and the massive vessel began to move. Lynn watched helplessly as it disappeared into the void, carrying Orin toward an uncertain future. For the first time in years, Lynn found himself praying, not to any god, but to the boy who had become humanity's greatest hope. A new hope. The alien vessel glided silently through the endless expanse of space, its shimmering hull reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. Orin stood in the center of a vast, circular chamber, the walls alive with shifting patterns of light. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. He was alone now, surrounded by beings far beyond his understanding. Ahead of him loomed the gateway, a massive, swirling vortex suspended in the void. It pulsed with raw power, its core a churning mix of light and shadow. The sight filled Orin with equal parts awe and dread. "This is it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The lead alien, its bioluminescent markings glowing softly, stepped forward. "The gateway awaits," it said, its voice resonating in Orin's mind. "The implant holds the sequence needed to stabilize the passage. Only you can complete the connection." Orin's heart pounded. "What happens if I can't?" The alien's gaze was steady. "Then the gateway will collapse, and the force beyond it will be unleashed. It will consume everything in its path." Orin swallowed hard, his small hands trembling. The weight of the universe seemed to rest on his shoulders, but in the back of his mind, he heard Kara's voice. "You're stronger than you think." He stepped closer to the console, a sleek platform covered in intricate alien symbols. The implant in his head pulsed in response, and he felt a strange warmth spread through his body. It was as if the gateway itself was alive, waiting for him. As Orin reached out to touch the console, The chamber shook violently. A loud, piercing tone filled the air, and the gateway's vortex began to destabilize, its edges flickering and cracking. Orin stumbled, fear gripping him. "The sequence must be completed," the alien said urgently. "The energy is too unstable. Act now, or all will be lost." Orin closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He focused on the implant, letting its glow guide him. Images flashed through his mind. Alien symbols, fragments of code, and fleeting glimpses of Kara. The implant wasn't just a device. It was a map, a guide that only he could follow. His fingers moved instinctively across the console, activating the sequence. The symbols lit up one by one, their glow intensifying as the gateway began to stabilize. The vortex's chaotic energy smoothed into a calm, swirling light. "It's working," Orin said, his voice filled with cautious hope. But just as the sequence neared completion, a sharp pain shot through his head. The implant flared, sending waves of energy through his body. Orin cried out, collapsing to his knees. "Hold on, child," the alien said, stepping closer. "You are almost there." Orin gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand. His legs felt like they would give out, but he pressed on. The last symbol pulsed before him, waiting for his touch. Summoning every ounce of strength, Orin placed his hand on it. The chamber filled with blinding light as the gateway stabilized fully. The vortex now spun smoothly, its core glowing with a soft, golden hue. The energy in the room shifted, becoming calm yet powerful, like the eye of a storm. The alien turned to Orin, its voice filled with reverence. "You have done it. The gateway is open." Orin stepped back, his body trembling. "What happens now?" A low hum filled the air as the vortex began to expand. From its center emerged a massive, luminous figure, an entity of light and energy that radiated warmth and peace. It was unlike anything Orin had imagined, its presence both comforting and overwhelming. The figure spoke, its voice resonating in every corner of the chamber. "To those who bridged the divide, we offer our gratitude. Through this union, peace shall be restored, and the wounds of the past shall heal." Orin felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had brought two worlds together. But the implant still pulsed faintly, a reminder that his journey wasn't over. The alien leader stepped forward, bowing its head. "You are the bridge, Orin. Your connection to us and your people will guide this alliance. The implant will remain as a symbol of unity, and as your responsibility." Orin nodded, his young face etched with a newfound resolve. "I'll do whatever it takes." The alien ship returned him to Vesper 9, where Lynn waited anxiously by the docking bay. The sight of Orin stepping out of the vessel, alive and whole, brought tears to Lynn's eyes. "You did it," Lynn said, his voice shaking. "You really did it." Orin smiled faintly, his glowing eyes filled with determination. "Kara would have wanted this. She believed in me. And now I have to believe in myself." The alien ship disappeared into the stars, leaving Orin and Lynn to face the uncertain future ahead. But for the first time, Orin felt a spark of hope. The gateway was open, and with it, the possibility of a brighter tomorrow. As the boy looked up at the night sky, the implant's faint glow seemed to echo a single thought: "This is just the beginning."